And the second biggest example is in the penicillin production. So Alexander Fleming already discovered penicillin, it's all over. So, but during the Second World War time, so they needed an antibiotic against a wide range of microorganisms because soldiers were getting infected with a lot of um, infectious organisms because they get wounds during the war. So Howard Florey is again a biochemist and Ernst Stein. So these two people have been appointed by the UK government to start producing penicillin, either chemical or fermentation. It doesn't matter. So they asked them to do. So then these people made a collaboration with different industries and US government. So industries like Merck, Pfizer, Squibb, and this NRL lab in Chicago. So they made a collaboration, and now they are debating whether to choose a chemical route or a fermentation route. So till those time for all pharmaceutical molecules, so production of them using chemical route is very predominant, and people feel that because fermentation is not yet developed so much, and people always feel that it's an unsuccessful process. So, but when they look at the pathway, how to synthesize penicillin using chemical route, so the route is very complex. Okay, so you have 6, 7 reactions has to go from the starting material, uh, aldehyde, and with the penicillin hydrochloride. So, and if you look at all these cases, always in every reaction have DL isomers. Okay, so which means that every step will you lose 50% of your yield. Okay, and you have a lot of toxic solvents being used, and the temperature of certain reactions are at 0 degrees centigrade, and some reactions happens at 250 degrees centigrade. It's a very energy expensive process, and since the yields are very low, they found that chemically to produce penicillin is very challenging and will become very expensive. It is not economically a physical process. So they decided to go with the biological route by taking out a strain from what Alexander Fleming has been discovered. So, but later the US NRL lab has identified a new strain, not notatum, it is a chrysogenin strain, so which produces much better penicillin than the strain that have been identified by Alexander Fleming. And they have changed the medium also to constantly liquor lactose based medium. And then it went undergo series of mutations. So if you look at here, so NRL lab itself, they mutated the native chrysogenin strain to it got a spontaneous natural mutation. So it used to give 2.5 folds increase in penicillin production. And then they also made that Cold Spring Harbor lab, took this strain and then made further mutation by X-ray mutagenesis. So this is called mutant X1612, which used to give nearly 5 times more than the wild type strain. Then University of Wisconsin Madison had generated a wide library of high penicillin yield strains. So one among them strain is called Q176, which produce around 550 micrograms per ml of this one. And further strain improvement techniques they used to get around 1,800 micrograms per ml of penicillin. But the problem is that till that time they were growing the cells on a solid surface and then try to grow them and then extract the penicillin from that. But when they want to produce in very large quantities, so it is not going to be feasible. So they decided to go for submerged fermentation. Okay. So submerged fermentation existed till that time, like ethanol, acetal fermentation, they do it, but they are anaerobic process, and sterility is not a major problem in that case. Now the scientists face a huge problem because this is an aerobic process and aeration requirement is quite high, and you need to supply a large amount of sterile air into the fermentation process. Now they have to think about designing a new filtration system to pass the sterile air into the reactor, and also they have to have a stable nutrient to produce, and they want to produce in large amounts up to 50,000 milligrams per liter at least. And most importantly, the downstream processing for penicillin is also quite challenging because it's a highly sensitive to temperature. So you need to have a very stringent conditions in the purification of penicillin from the fermentation medium. And at that time, so no single person had all this expertise. It was a completely interdisciplinary approach from microbiologists, chemists, biochemists, and chemical and mechanical engineers. They designed bioreactors and they start producing growing cells and then optimize the process. And Pfizer is the first company to complete the entire process in 6 months. And they were able to cure around 1 lakh patients per year with that one single industry. Then the technology was transferred and they started producing in and many other countries for penicillin production. So this was a big breakthrough for probably the origin for the synthesis of a new field called biotechnology. And from that time onwards, a plethora of antibiotics have been screened from streptomyces and other actinomycete strains. And a lot of antibiotics have been successfully produced through biotechnological route. So in the current scenario, people should remember that many people in the fermentation area are looking at two types of technologies. One is called microbial cell factory approach. So what they're trying to do is they take the lignocellulose biomass, okay? So you somehow convert them into sugars either by chemical or biotechnological route. Once you get the sugars, you give it to a strain. Now it's not a wild type strain, so they try to engineer the strain so that it can take up the multiple sugars present in the from lignocellular biomass and try to produce multiple products just like your uh, chemical industries what they do. For example, many people may not know about chemical industries. For example, I give an example of ammonia industry. Okay, so in case of ammonia industry, people don't think that people just only produce ammonia. So once you produce ammonia, so they make ammonium sulfate, diammonium phosphate, fertilizer industry. One single industry makes so many products. Okay, and then urea they make. Okay, so and then they make nitric oxide, nitric acid. So several molecules they can prepare from a single industry. So that's the kind of thinking goes now to the industrial biotechnology where people would like to make multiple products from a single source. Okay, so the source is again a renewable energy source. Probably plant biomass is what people are trying to look at out to convert into useful products. So one such example is the biorefinery concept. So Reliance is also Reliance and Proj. So two industries in our country which are predominantly doing research on this area, where you take a plant biomass and then you process it either through chemical and this thing and make them into mixture of sugars. So which contains hexoses and pentoses sugars. Hexoses are like glucose, arabinose, and all that, and we have xylose, and also we have some lignin. So try to remove the lignin and then try to ferment it. So you can produce fuel, that is ethanol, and other chemicals. So you can produce organic acids, you can produce biopolymers like polyhydroxyalkanates and polyhydroxybutirates. So this is one kind of approach is what people are looking at it. And the second thing that current focus is on targeting at platform chemicals. So what are platform chemicals? So platform chemicals are the molecules, once they are synthesized, they can be targeted to produce multiple products which are having a lot of high value in the market. So I'll give you an example here, 3-hydroxypropanic acid. Once you produce 3-hydroxypropanic acid, so you can make it to 1,3-propanediol by hydrogenation by chemical reaction. Okay, or you can polymerize it to become polyhydroxypropanide, or you can oxidate to become malonic acid, or you can dehydrate to become acrylic acid, and so on, acrylamide. So these are a lot of applications in the paint industry, cosmetic industry, and food industry. So hydroxypropanic acid is called a platform chemical. Okay, so once you make it, so many industries can pick it up to try to do it, or a single industry also can try to produce variety of compounds. So in such a case, I would like to give an example of an industry called Cargill industry in US. So they try to produce the hydroxypropanic acid from glucose. It's a anaerobic fermentation. So in fermentation, at the end of fermentation, they get the hydroxypropanic acid, the ammonium salt. So they take it up this thing and do extract salt splitting, which means they remove the ammonium salt and take only the hydroxypropanic acid. Whatever the ammonium that has been removed is been taken back to again to the fermenter, and which can be used as a nitrogen source to the medium. And acid extracted, what do you call this? Ammonium sorry, 3-hydroxypropanic acid. Now we'll go into a chemical reactor using a chemical catalyst, which will convert this into acrylic acid. So it's a combination of chemical and biological route to produce acrylic acid. Till 3-hydroxypropanic acid, it's a biological fermentation route, and then followed by a chemical route. Okay, so they are the leading producers of 3-hydroxypropanic acid in the world. If you look at the pathway, so from glucose it goes to in glycolysis to pyruvate, and then from pyruvate it has to go to alpha-alanine, and this is a rate-limiting enzyme, alanine 2,3 amino mutase, which converts alpha-alanine to beta-alanine. Okay, once it is produced, then it goes to malonate semialdehyde to 3-hydroxypropanic acid. So why the cargill industry is so successful in producing high amounts of 3-hydroxypropionic acid is, so they have made a post engineering for this strain. So they made, what they made is they made the glucose to pyruvate, the usual pathway. So this cannot be avoided. So no, they have engineered this strain in such a way that so they knock down this gene which enters into TCA cycle. And similarly, if it's an anaerobic process, it might go to lactate production. So they delete a lactate dehydrogenase gene. Similarly, the alcohol dehydrogenase gene is also being deleted, and pyruvate acyl coenzyme A, so that gene is also being deleted, so that all the flux coming from glucose enters, comes to pyruvate, and then straight away directly goes to the hydrazine propionic acid. So all the other possible branches where the carbon flux can be diverted has been completely blocked. So they successfully diverted all the flux to here. So the yields are almost close to, molar yield is almost more than 0.95 for the hydroxypropionic acid production. Okay, it's one of the successful industry where they can do it. So you have a lot of advantages by doing biological route to produce many of these products, but the major drawbacks is that the medium itself is very complex, and you're producing your product into that mixture. So mixers, the starting material for your downstreaming process is very complex. Okay, so you need to have a lot of separation thing. Okay, and in fermentation also, you if you look at the medium is more 95% it's water only. Okay, so the amount of product that you are getting are very diluted in the fermentation medium. So here some of the data is that penicillin production. So you have around 5% is the product in the water, 95% is water. So in alcohol fermentation, around 10% to 15% maximum you can get alcohol. Okay, the remaining is water. So the remaining 85 to 95% of water, so we need to remove them. So as mentioned, removal of water is again a thermal expansive process. Okay. So, and another problem that you can face is that, so whenever you do fermentation, so if there's a possibility of any contamination, so then the entire fermentation becomes wasted. Okay? This will not happen in the chemical process. Okay. And third is variability, genetic variability. So whenever you're working with wild type strains, so when they undergo subsequent cell divisions, so there is a possibility that a spontaneous mutation can happen in the cell. So such mutations can either improve the production of the product, or it can suppress the production of your product. If it suppresses, again, you will lose the wild type strain. So preservation of your wild type strain is very, very important when you do fermentation process. And that is one of the reasons why many industries wanted to have a recombinant strain, so where you don't have face this kind of problems. So this is a typical biotechnological process. So you have from stock culture to media preparation, inoculation preparation. So all this comes under as an upstream processing in the biotech industry. And then there's only one major region where you convert the actual substrate into a product. Once the product is being formed, then you need to go for purification, which is called downstreaming process. So usually in fermentation technology, people focuses mostly on the upstream processing and also the reaction operation. So upstream processing also includes the strain development, mutation strategies, recombinant DNA technology. All this comes under the upstream processing in the industry. So this is another area where the country is now also majorly focusing on this, on production of biofuels from, again, a plant biomass or lignocellulose biomass. Okay, so biofuels are nothing but fuel produced from directly or indirectly from a biomass or biodegradable substances, and fuel can be either liquid, gas, or solid also. Okay, these are the most famous fuels you would have come across: biodiesel, bioethanol. Biogas is nothing but predominantly is a methane gas. Okay, so if you look at the biofuels, we have three types of biofuels. One is first generation biofuels, and then second generation, third generation. In first generation biofuels, majorly, so you prepare the biofuels like ethanol from the edible food material. Okay, so either from sugar, starch, vegetable oil, or animal fat. So which is consumed by humans for the day-to-day basis. Okay, and since the first generation biofuels production will increase the cost of the commodities like all these vegetables, so people try to avoid producing first generation biofuels. Then they moved on to second generation biofuels, where the biofuels have been produced from non-edible parts of the material, okay, which is biomass waste. From biomass waste, we try to produce biofuels. Okay, so second generation biofuels are the advanced biofuels. So they are made from non-edible part of crops, and they are sustainable feedstock, which means you can grow them and you have the feedstock consistently throughout the year to produce your biofuel. And the main criteria is that these crops should grow on a marginal land. Okay, you don't require a large amount of water, and you can grow them throughout the year. These are some of the examples. So one, you can produce biogas, where you can take agriculture waste straw and then you gasify it at high temperatures. You produce a synthesis gas, and then you put it into a chemical converter, so you can convert them into hydrocarbons like methane, butane, and all that. Okay, and then you can mix them with oil and use it as a fuel. Or the regular fermentation approach, you take plant biomass, lignocellulosic biomass, so hydrolyze them into sugars and then ferment it to ethanol. Again, you can mix them with gasoline. So these are the important uh, two types of biofuels. And currently, most of them are trying to second generation biofuels. However, even though you have third generation biofuel, which is through algal production. So one of the major constraints people face is the growth rate of algal strains is quite low, so that you need a lot amount of time, and most of these fuels, which is called lipids, which will be synthesized inside the cells. So the downstreaming process is also going to be a little expensive, because you have to hydrolyze lyse the cells, then extract the lipids, and then you have to esterify them, and then go for biodiesel production. Okay, so these are the constraints that people face in the third generation biofuels. So when you compare with the 1G to 2G, so first generation fuels are, you need to debate either food or fuel, but in case of 2G, you don't have that problem. It's all non-edible biomass, and you need a good agricultural land for first generation biofuel, so you can grow on marginal lands, so it's easy to do it, and it's very scalable, because agricultural lands are limited, so you cannot grow them in large quantities, but non-agricultural lands are comparatively more than the agricultural land, so you can easily scale it up, and you can also get high yields of biofuels. So this information is most important for the students. So people always talk about lignocellulose biomass to ethanol, biodiesel, and all these things. But most importantly is that, so you can also produce a lot of biochemicals and platform chemicals from lignocellulosic biomass. For example, hydroxymethyl furfural and furfural, they are all platform chemicals. So from furfural, you can tell to levulinic acid, you can make it to malonic acid, you can do so many compounds. So which are a lot of applications in the industry. Okay, they can also be used as a solvent for lubricant oils, and they can be used as a fungicides. Okay, so you have a lot of applications. And similarly, you can think of levulinic acid. Okay, so they are precursor for plasticizers and for many pharmaceutical API ingredients. Okay, they also have a lot of applications in cosmetic industries. Apart from that, so when you have sugars like arabinose, xylose, and all that, you can always convert them into xylitol, arbitol, and glucose into sorbitol. So they are natural sweeteners. Okay, so they have a lot of applications in the food industries. Apart from sweetening agents, they also act as osmolytes and laxatives in pharmaceutical industries. Okay, so the different other byproducts which people can start working on it from lignocellulosic biomass. And also you can look at it, organic acids. So like dihydroxypropylenic acid, butyric acid, acetic acids. In TCL cycle, you have a lot of organic acids to do that. So one can try to exploit a lignocellulosic biomass to produce these kind of products. And similarly, you can also produce a lot of solvents like acetone and butanol. So ethanol, acetone, butanol fermentation also quite predominant, but producing them from the natural plant material is a challenging thing to people to do it. So this is a schematic diagram which shows that from lignocellulose you can get cellulose and hemicellulose, and lignin separate them. And lignin can be chemically converted into phenols, aromatic acids, and other smaller molecules which have applications in the chemical and bioindustries. And cellulose and hemicellulose can be chemically hydrodeoxygenated to biofuels using a catalytic process. Or you can go through, alternately, you can go through microbiological process where you can ferment them into alcohols, fuels. You can dehydrate them into furfurols. Again, this forms a platform chemical. or you can make it to synthesis gas, hydrocarbon and biohydrogen, using chemical and biochemical approaches. To be more specific for the students to understand, so if you take cellulose, the plant material has cellulose, semicellulose, and lignin. From cellulose, you can hydrolyze them to get glucose. So glucose is a C6 carbon atom. So from this, I can make variety of compounds. Okay, so I can make one carbon atom molecules like methane, which is natural gas, synthesis gas, and I can make two carbon atoms like ethanol, acetic acid, and so on. I can also make three carbon atom molecules like glyceraldehyde, glycerol, lactic acid, and so on. So malic acid, erythro C4 carbon atom, furfural acid, C5 carbon atom, and also to other polyols like sorbitol, fructose, and so on. So you can if you separate cellulose from plant biomass, and you can easily make so variety of molecules ranging from C1 atom to C6 atom carbon atoms molecules you can do it. And then you have hemicellulose part of the plant material, which can be hydrolyzed, and then you can have xylose, major component, and xylose can be chemically, you can hydrogenate or deoxygenate to produce variety of compounds, and you can also convert them into natural sweetener, xylitol. And lignin, so lignin can be converted into a lot of aromatic acids and phenols, so which has a lot of applications in the petrochemical industries. And then you also have so these days lignin people are converting into make alternative to the synthetic plastics. So they are trying to convert this lignin into a plastic material. So we have variety of things that can be done from lignocellulose biomass, and India is one of the richest country in terms of obtaining plant biomass that converted into value-added products. So in the last couple of minutes, I'll wind up my lecture. So this is a process which people adopted in Brazil. So I always have a very opinion about Brazilian scientific community thinking process. See, they found that their strength is the agricultural land where they can produce large amount of sugarcane. Okay, so unlike us, we focus on multiple things, doing cancer, anti-HIV, so many things. We're trying to copycat what other Western countries are doing it. So, but these guys are very peculiar. So they choose that they want to be strengthened in the bioethanol production. So they grow the sugarcane and then try to take sucrose and sugars from that, both from juice as well as the bagasse. Okay, and then they ferment it and to get ethanol, and they can use it as a biofuel. So US and Brazil together contribute to 80% of world's bioethanol production for fuels. So what is the success behind them is that it's very complicated. Okay, so it's not one fermentation group is not doing it all. The first and foremost thing that they have started is developing the sugar content in the sugar cane. Okay, plant biotechnologists and molecular biologists develop a new variety of sugar cane which has high content of sucrose. Okay, so they produce that first. The target is to produce high sugar yield per kg of sugar cane. Okay, so it's almost they are double than what we get in our country. So they are still dedicated for the fuel fermentation. Okay, so the initial sucrose content is not there. It is not going to be economically feasible to produce bioethanol in large scale. And then, so once you have sucrose, so instead of doing it in high temperature hydrolysis, they developed a novel enzymes for breaking down the sucrose in the juice to glucose and fructose. Okay, so there's a lot of biochemists and enzymologists developed a lot of enzymes for this process. So in addition to this, what they have done is they also developed a new enzymes to break down the bagasse material, to break them to get sugars again from the biomass, again the bagasse. Okay, and then they also developed a chemist worked on that to develop a organosolvent extraction process to remove specifically lignin from the bagasse. Okay, so if they remove lignin, which is going to be a toxic for growth of ethanol fermentation. Okay, so they remove that using, so chemist people have involved in those projects to develop that thing. And biochemists, enzymologists developed a lot of new enzymes and a lot of cloning enzymes, produce them in large quantities to do this process. And it is not also not a high controlled process, okay, like antibiotics and all. So it's not that much restricted to the sterility. So they had a better control of bacterial contaminants entering into the fermentation process during that. If the bacteria enters, they try to produce acetic acids. Okay, so they don't want to do that. So they developed a technology. So without that much sterility and this thing, they can produce ethanol by preventing the contamination of bacterial strains during the fermentation process. And also they able to chemical engineers develop a uh, chemical control of ethanol production in the distillation column maximum. They could able to distill the ethanol from the fermentation medium and avoid this microbial contaminant throughout the entire process. Okay, so such a very strong team work devoted for almost a decade, and so that's why they are able to get. That's why they are able to success this process. These are some of the facts and figures in this one. So they have spent around $167 million on the bioenergy project by Brazilian government, scientific community. So around 167 million maybe corresponds to 1100, 1200, maybe 1200 crores money. And they have 13 co-funding partners involved in this one. 7 private companies co-funded this project apart from that one. And 467 scholarships were given to the people to work on these projects. So it looks like Ignite still working on this project. There were 206 research projects have been sanctioned to various institutes and various industries to work on to solve this problem globally. And 300 plus researchers were involved in working in this entire field. And it's not one field, so 21 fields of knowledge of scientists worked on this entire field, starting from agriculture, plant, molecular biology, enzymology, biochemistry, chemists, and so on. And nearly more than 17 patents and nearly to 900 publications people have published on this entire area. So there's a lot of tremendous scope for our country also to focus on such topics which is feasible in our country, and think of younger generation should be trying to do on renewable energy sources to produce a lot of value-added compounds which can develop our country's energy security. So with this, I will end my talk and thank you for your listening. If you have any questions, you can please. Any questions?
Audience, you can ask question one by one. If anybody,
I have a question. Could I ask Professor Gumadi?
Yeah.
Could you tell, from most of them are biology students here in the conference, could you give an idea like how to take their career as a biologist in different, as you already mentioned, probably I don't know whether they understood. Could you like give a short abstract of this?
Yeah, so biology students, I don't know what kind of consoles are either botany, zoology, or biochemistry. That's what I clearly said. So now a biology scientist needs to have a lot of expertise in basic molecular biology techniques, and then you should know
sir, your voice is mute, sir.
okay. Is it audible now?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
audible.
audible? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's audible.
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned already that the biochemistry part and mathematics part is quite important for any biologist to have at least appreciable amount of knowledge, so that you can easily adaptable yourself to any kind of area that you want to work on. Okay, so the basic technique that people need to learn is you should have strong knowledge in molecular biology for biologists. Okay, and then molecular and cellular biology if you have that, and then along with that, you know, strong biochemistry, it's more than sufficient. And you have max also, it's wonderful. So
Thank you.
and opportunities as such, if you say after BSc, after MSc, it will be a little tough. Okay, so you might get a core job, but pays will not be that much attractive. But if you do higher studies and if you exhibit a lot of hands-on experience and doable things, then companies might prefer you better.
Thank you, sir. That was really a remarkable speech. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
So anyone like to ask questions? Okay, thank you very much, sir, for your pleasant speak and very impressive one. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, now the section is going to Dr. Sugandhi for the vote of thanks.
Now, we are now at the end of this inaugural function. To give a perfect end to this event, I now request Dr. N. Sugandhi Purushothaman, Academic Director and Scientist, Tanbio R&D Solution, to deliver the words of gratitude. Stop and type.
To everybody, a pleasant and beautiful morning. It gives me a great pleasure to express my gratitude to all of the dignitaries present in this ceremony. I would like to express my gratitude to our primary guest, Dr. Satyanarayanan N. Gumadi, who graced our event with his inspirational words. I am very happy to invite the 20 eminent speakers who all are going to share the imperial knowledge to us. I would like to express my gratitude to our pillar of support, Dr. Purushothaman Balakrishnan, founder, CEO, and scientist of Tanbio R&D Solution, without whom this thought-provoking conference would not have been possible. I would want to express my gratitude to our scientific advisory board members for their unwavering support, who all are made this event a success. Last but not least, thank you to our wonderful audience for making this conference a huge success. I would want to express my gratitude to everyone you once more.
Thank you so much, madam, for your words of gratitude. May I now request you all to give your respect to our national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे